For such a small planet, Pluto's mountains are epic, bigger than Everest and made entirely of ice. Such a bizarre landscape can't be found anywhere else in our solar system. Yeah, Pluto's a pretty harsh cold place. Temperatures there can dip to minus 400 degrees Fahrenheit. The coldest ever recorded on Earth was in Antarctica, a measly minus 135. Now let's head back to the heart of Pluto. That's actually a vast plain covered in nitrogen ice. Scientists discovered that Pluto's heart makes the winds on the planet blow. Craters are also big, and some of them show signs of filling and erosion. That's something that happens right here on Earth. When land is worn away and shaped by natural forces like wind, water, and ice, that's erosion. So, what makes all this so special on Pluto? It could be evidence of tectonic plate activity. You know, big plates of land surfing on liquid rock, forming mountain chains, breaking continents apart, putting them back together. That's something scientists so far have only ever seen on Earth, not on any other planet in the solar system. Now, looks like Pluto could be more like our own planet. That, and there's water on Pluto, 1/3 of its surface in fact. But of course, it's not like Earth water. It's more like a rocky slushy. Yum. Still, no signs of life out there, at least not for now. It's taken a long time to get the little information we know about Pluto. It was first discovered almost 100 years ago and deemed the 9th planet from the Sun, until 2006 when its official planet membership card was revoked. Poor Pluto. It was dubbed the biggest dwarf planet in the Kuiper Belt, a region outside our solar system full of other dwarf planets and icy bodies circling the Sun. A few months before that, they launched the New Horizons mission. It was the first space probe researchers sent to Pluto in 2006. Zipping at over 35,000 miles per hour, that's 45 times the speed of sound, it still took the probe almost a decade to reach its destination. That's how far away the tiny planet is. In fact, Pluto is nearly 40 times the distance from Earth to the Sun. If you were there looking up at the sky, you'd see the Sun as a tiny dot like any other star in the sky. Once New Horizons finally reached Pluto in 2015, it got close enough to get some incredible pictures of the surface. It also collected important data and observations, like those strange red spots and that heart-shaped region. But Pluto gets even stranger, especially its orbit. Most other planets go around the Sun in almost perfect circles with the Sun close to the center. The Sun is nowhere near the center of Pluto's orbit, and the orbit is so stretched out that Pluto sometimes crosses into Neptune's path and gets closer to the Sun than the blue gas giant. So, the unusual effect of the strange orbit? Pluto sometimes has an atmosphere, and sometimes not. When it's closer to the Sun, a thin atmosphere of nitrogen forms. But once the planet starts moving further away from our Sun, the atmosphere freezes and falls to the surface in an ice storm of epic proportions. Pluto is probably a lot smaller than you imagine. If you put it on a map of the Earth, it would only span about halfway across the US. Yet this little planet has 5 moons spinning around it. And life on Pluto would be one endless year for us humans. Imagine no birthdays your whole life. Since it was discovered in 1930, we still haven't seen it complete a full circle around the Sun. 1 year on Pluto is 248 Earth years, and we'll finally see that happen on March 23, 2178. Mark your calendar. Since Pluto got kicked out of the official planet club, Neptune became the last one in line. It's actually a big ball of ice and gas. So, like with the other gas giants, if you tried to land on this planet, you'd just keep going deeper and deeper into seemingly endless clouds and atmosphere. Funny thing about the blue planet, it might not have a rocky surface like you and I are used to, but its surface-level gravity is about the same as Earth's. Same can't be said for any other planet in the solar system. As we make our way closer to the Sun, we pass the next gas giant, Uranus, that non-conformist planet that goes around the Sun basically rolling on its side. One full orbit is 84 Earth years, so you might be lucky enough to celebrate your first birthday in your whole life there. Only one party, so you better make it count. And now we approach the jewel of the solar system, Saturn, the second biggest planet after Jupiter and another gas giant where you'd sink in an endless atmosphere if you tried to land a spaceship there. Saturn is the least dense planet of them all, meaning if you put it in a giant glass of water, it'd float. Those famous rings are made up of dust, ice, and rock, some as tiny as a grain of sand, others bigger than houses. But get this, Saturn's rings are raining down on the planet, enough to fill an Olympic-sized pool in a half an hour. At that rate, the famous blue ring system will disappear completely in 300 million years. By the way, Neptune, Uranus, and Jupiter also have rings. They're just not as visible and bright as Saturn's. Imagine combining all the planets into one. Now make it 2 times bigger. Still not as large as Jupiter. Scientists called it a failed star, since it's mostly made of helium and hydrogen, just like our Sun. But jumbo-sized Jupiter still isn't massive enough to kickstart the chemical processes that could turn it into a star. It's the fastest spinning planet, so it takes only 10 hours to complete a full rotation on its axis. Imagine trying to squeeze sleep, work, friends, hobbies, movies, shopping, your whole routine in less than half an Earth day. Magnificent tall mountains, the highest in the entire solar system. The most epic dust storms ever. Deep valleys, craters. I'm talking Mars, our potential home in the future. If you love sunsets, you'd definitely enjoy Martian ones. They're incredibly blue, while the sky throughout the day is pinkish red. Even though Mars is our closest neighbor, from the surface, the sun would look half the size it does from Earth. So, not as close as it seems. Oh, and if you always dreamed of becoming a basketball player, Mars is your place. The red planet's gravity is only 37% of Earth's, so you jump 3 times higher there. Venus is a planet of extremes. The hottest surface, the most volcanoes, the brightest planet, and the closest one to Earth. It's also the slowest spinning and barely rotates, making a day on Venus last 243 Earth days. You could literally walk faster before the planet makes a complete turn. Venus also rotates in the opposite direction that Earth does, so sunrises are in the west and the sun sets in the east. Mercury. It doesn't have any moons or rings, and we're talking about the smallest planet in the whole solar system. A year lasts only 88 days, so if you live there, you'd have a lot of birthdays. Mercury is the closest planet to the Sun, but it's actually not the hottest. That prize goes to Venus. Temperatures on Mercury don't get as high as on Venus because it doesn't have an atmosphere to trap heat from the Sun. What Mercury does have is wrinkles. Its iron core cooled and shrank, causing the surface to contract too, and leaving all those wrinkles. That, or because it's so close to the Sun with no SPF. Maybe. Okay, picture this. In the not-too-distant future, you're heading out on a space vacation, and you need to decide which items are worth bringing along. But instead of checking the weather forecast, you open a gravity simulator. That's because you need to know how each object will behave on different planets. For instance, should you take this metal shovel with you or not? Well, according to your itinerary, it's going to be a long trip. You're planning to visit every planet in the solar system and even a few moons. But due to the difference in gravity on these space bodies, you're not sure how useful some of the objects you're going to bring along will be. Well, let's start with the basics. Tupperware. I don't know about other space travelers, but us Earthlings carry our Tupperware around everywhere we go. And still, if you were to transport it to, let's say, Mercury, it would most likely fly away into the atmosphere. These plastic containers you use to keep your food are too light. And since the gravity on Mercury is 2.5 times weaker as gravity on Earth, well, maybe you'll have to fill your plastic containers up before taking them out of your spaceship to have a picnic. If a Tupperware container weighs about 0.5 pound on Earth, it'll weigh just 1/4 of that on Mercury. Now, if we add some bananas, a handful of baby carrots, and 2 watermelons, then it'll be safe to carry it out of your space vehicle. You'll just have some difficulty making it all fit in a standard-sized container. But wait! Before you do that, you should know that the atmospheric temperature on Mercury can reach up to 800 degrees Fahrenheit. This means that any plastic container will instantly melt as soon as it gets in contact with the air. It'll burn up all the food, too. You can probably try taking a titanium container, that will work, or just stick to astronaut food. Now, shall we say Venus? Okay, Venus. If you were to take the same empty container to Venus, it would behave similarly to how it does on Earth. This is because Venus is also known as our planet's twin. These two have much in common. For example, almost the same size and mass. And when the topic is gravity, the formula goes like this. The bigger the mass and the greater the density, the stronger the gravity. Venus's gravity is approximately 10% weaker than Earth's. So, yes, you may leave your spaceship with your container, empty or full, and enjoy a beautiful and scenic lunch on the surface of Venus. Now, you'll have to figure out a way to eat without taking your spacesuit off, though. The atmosphere of Venus is filled with sulfuric acid, which can irritate your nose and throat and cause difficulties in breathing. Or worse. Much worse. Now, you'll have to forget about taking anything too light outside on Phobos. A little hint for you, it's not a Greek island, not even Greek yogurt, although it's a cool name. It's actually one of Mars's moons. Here, even your spacecraft would need a little extra help to keep close to the ground. If it weighed as much as a school bus, any regular-sized person could pick it up with just one hand. This is because on Phobos, the inhabitants of Earth barely feel the weight of gravity. And be very careful when jumping around because one leap and you may fly straight into outer space.
Passengers on board the Voyager spaceship, please keep your arms and legs inside the vehicle at all times.
Well, you're approaching Jupiter, a gas giant. A never-ending storm is raging in its atmosphere. Plus, there's no solid surface there, which means no landing for you on this planet. If you look out the window, it might seem that you are moving through a giant cloud. But for the purpose of your experiment, it'll work just fine. Try throwing into the air that baseball you brought along in case you get bored of all the space travel. And measure the time it'll take the ball to hit the surface. If on Earth, the ball will fall at a speed of 32,174 feet per second. On Jupiter, the same ball will hit the ground at a speed 2.5 times greater than that. That's because Jupiter is more than 10 times as large as Earth and around 300 times as heavy as our blue planet. Now, if you move your spaceship just a little bit to the side, to one of Jupiter's moons, Europa, the situation will be completely different. Throwing a baseball in the air on Europa will mean never seeing it again. Gravity there is almost non-existent, which means that not only a baseball, but even a grown-up person can fly away any second. Now, on the other hand, if you decided to venture out of the spacecraft to explore Europa's gravitational field, why not try to lift the space vehicle itself? On Europa, a regular Earthling can easily lift up to 1,000 pounds, which is the equivalent of a full-size male moose. Or you can lift a pyramid-like formation of 9 regular people. The choice is yours. When approaching Saturn, be careful. While from afar, Saturn's rings look smooth and solid. From up close, you'll notice that they're made of chunks of ice and rocks floating in space. You won't want to have your spacecraft anywhere near those. There's also no solid surface on Saturn, which makes landing impossible. And the atmosphere is full of ammonia. Keep in mind that it's a pretty inhospitable environment for a human. Now, inside the spaceship, you find a collection of sci-fi books, enough to fill an entire bookshelf. Altogether, they must weigh around 400 pounds. Yep, that many books. And like someone with a superpower, you try to lift over 200 pounds of weight at a time. But guess what? You fail! Because Saturn's gravity is too similar to that on Earth. Now, in case you got confused with all this gravity talk, when we're measuring gravity, we're speaking about the power of the force by which a planet or other space body pulls objects toward its center. So, if you need some help in organizing that sci-fi collection in alphabetical order, ask the crew to move the spaceship to a neighboring space body with a weaker gravitational pull, like Pluto. These days, it's not considered a planet anymore, just a dwarf planet and one of the furthest from the Sun's space bodies. You'll need an extra warm spacesuit to wear there. Pluto is freezing cold and has a tiny surface. It's smaller than Earth's moon. But it's a great place to test your strength. If on Earth it's kind of impossible for a regular person to lift an elephant, on Pluto you'll be able to pick up a baby elephant weighing around 265 pounds. Or even a medium-sized elephant that can be as heavy as 2,000 pounds. On your way back to Earth, you make a pit stop on Uranus. The coldest planet in our solar system has an average temperature of around minus 350 degrees Fahrenheit. So, if you attempt to get out of the spacecraft, you'll freeze mid-movement. Although gravity on Uranus is pretty similar to that on Earth, there's one thing that's very different: time. A 2-week getaway on Earth turns into a 3-year-long vacation on Uranus. Now, when you get sick of cold planets, you can travel back to warmer ones. Okay, now, Mars is definitely warmer than Uranus, but its average temperature is still about minus 81 degrees. On Earth, we only have such low temperatures at the South Pole during the winter. When you land on Mars, you'll start to feel light and strong at the same time. Mars's gravity is about 2.5 times weaker than that on Earth. So, in other words, you'll probably manage to lift your own body weight without any difficulty. So, all those handstands you've been dreaming of doing, you've found a place to fulfill your dream.
You accepted an offer to participate in an experimental program that'll take you and your colleagues to different planets in the solar system to see how humans can live there. As a volunteer, you dedicated your entire life to this study. You're 25 years old, and your destination is Mercury. Your colleague, Ryan, is 45. He'll be based on Pluto. Nora, 18, will go to Jupiter. Jeff, 65, will go to Mars. And Vivian, who's also 25, will head to Neptune. Each of you will have a unique chemical compound to boost your lifespan before reuniting. You're all in the launch pad and ready for takeoff. Each of you sits in the cockpit of your spaceship, and it blasts off right to your planets. Even though Mercury is the closest planet to the Sun, it's not the hottest. That honor goes to Venus, but it is the fastest planet to orbit the Sun. On Earth, a year is composed of 365 days, but on Mercury, you'll only have to wait about 3 months to celebrate the new year. 88 days to be exact. Your team's concept of time will change drastically. A part of Einstein's theory of relativity is that time can be affected by acceleration and doesn't flow steadily. It moves slowly for objects that are in motion, rather than a stationary observer. It's also affected by the gravitational pull. The closer you are to a large mass with strong gravity, the slower time will be. People can't perceive this phenomenon. Scientists estimated that the difference is around 90 billionths of a second over 79 years. But at different planets with different gravitational mass, the differences might be visible. Astronaut Scott Kelly went to space, while his twin brother, who is 6 seconds older than him, remained on Earth. When Scott returned, the gap extended to 6 seconds and 5 milliseconds. You arrive in your dormitory and unpack your stuff. Outside, you see the wasteland, and the temperature is above 800 degrees Fahrenheit. But at night, the temperature drops to a whopping negative 300 degrees Fahrenheit. That's because Mercury doesn't have an atmosphere to trap any heat to keep the planet warm like a desert. The magnetic field has solar winds from the sun that create strong tornadoes with hot plasma. After settling in and placing all your fabulous sci-fi books on the shelf, the ground shakes and knocks down some stuff. Mercury's surface has active tectonic plates that cause earthquakes. It's just something you'll have to get used to. You're able to have a video call with the rest of your colleagues for a quick catch-up. Ryan is on Pluto, billions of miles away from you, and has the worst reception. Pluto is considered to be a dwarf planet and one of the coldest places in our solar system, with temperatures reaching negative 400 degrees Fahrenheit, so Ryan doesn't really leave the dorm. He takes his webcam and shows you and everyone else what's outside his window. There are mountains higher than 10,000 feet covered with methane ice. Pluto needs 248 years to orbit the Sun, which means it'll take Ryan the most time to celebrate New Year's. No human can last for such a time on Earth, but the chemical enhancements make it possible. On this day, Ryan will have to wait 90,520 Earth days for New Year's. With gravity, he might age much slower than anyone on Earth. After he shows everyone around, the youngest one in the experiment, Nora, vlogs her new setup in the solar system's biggest planet, Jupiter. Jupiter is so giant that more than 1,300 Earths could fit inside it. That's like 1,300 grapes versus the size of a basketball. And even though it's that big, the planet completes a rotation around its axis in just 10 hours, so a day is considerably shorter here than on Earth. She shows you around her dorm, which resembles a fun playground filled with entertainment. The whole complex is sturdy enough to withstand the extreme winds that can reach more than 335 miles per hour. The people in charge of the experiment were smart enough not to place the complex in the Great Red Spot, an area with a hurricane-like storm that has lasted more than 300 years. And this spot is twice the size of Earth. Jupiter needs around 12 Earth years to make a complete orbit around the Sun, which is 4,307 days to be exact. This would mean that Nora would have to wait 24 Earth years to be 20 years old technically. But Jupiter's gravity is a lot stronger than on Earth's, which means she might age twice as fast. After showing everyone around, Jeff, the oldest one, begins giving everyone a tour of his place on Mars. It's called the Red Planet because it's rich in iron minerals, which might rust. His bunker is classy and feels the most luxurious over all of the others, and it has the best view as well. You get to see the highest mountain in the whole solar system, about 3 times higher than Mount Everest. Olympus Mons is also a volcano, as if being the tallest mountain wasn't already something extraordinary. Mars needs 687 days to orbit the Sun, which is a little less than 2 Earth years. It may not be the quickest in the solar system, but it's not as extreme as Pluto. Mars also has weaker gravitational force than Earth, but with 25 hours a day, he may not feel the time difference compared to everyone else. Vivian jumps in late in the call to show around her place on Neptune. She used to live near some hills and mountainsides, so the windiest planet in our solar system isn't that challenging for her. It has a rocky core like Earth and an uninhabitable atmosphere. Neptune is blue because of the absorption of red light by methane in the hydrogen-helium atmosphere. She shows everyone a view from her panoramic window, and you can see all 14 of Neptune's moons and some cloud formations. A whole day on this planet is just 16 hours. Vivian would have to wait 164 Earth years for Neptune to orbit around the Sun, which is 59,860 days on Earth, beyond any ordinary lifespan for humans on Earth, but a giant tortoise could be okay with that. But with everyone using a special chemical compound, the experiment could be conclusive. Gravity is also strong on Neptune compared to Earth, so she might age just as fast as Nora on Jupiter. After the video call, you take a tour around the complex and find out that other people stay with you in different bunkers, and the same goes for your colleagues on the other planets. 1,000 years later. You've forgotten what Earth looks like. You've forgotten what the atmosphere felt like, and even the wind brushing against your skin. But you've made your place pretty cozy, with so much plant life and cloned animals from Earth in the biochambers. You completely forgot about the mission at this point, and suddenly got a notification about a video call to update everyone about your progress. You set it up and wait for everyone to log in. After about a minute, no one responds. You haven't heard from them since the last video call 1,000 years ago. But then, one by one, everyone joins the video conference. The chemicals in everyone's body, which is enough to extend your lifespan, doesn't affect your body physically. It doesn't make you age at the same rate as on Earth, but it slows it down quite well over 1,000 years. Not everyone looks the same. Ryan was 45 years old on Earth, but he's only aged 4 years with Pluto orbiting the Sun 4 times in 1,000 years. He's now 49 years old, but if he were on Earth, he'd be 1,045 years old. But since he was on Pluto with weak gravity, he didn't physically change as drastic as predicted. Nora was 18 when she went to Jupiter and is still the bubbly girl she was 1,000 years ago. It takes 12 years for the planet to orbit the Sun, which means she's now technically 30 years old on Jupiter. But with Jupiter's strong gravity, she now looks 60 years old. Jeff landed on Mars when he was 65 years old, and if it takes 687 days for a complete orbit around the Sun, then that would make him 596 years old at the moment. Instead of looking extremely old, the weak gravity on the red planet made him age slower relative to the time spent. He looks to be around 80 years old. After landing on Neptune, Vivian, who was your age, is now only 31 years old on the blue planet. It takes 164 years for it to make a full rotation, making her quite old. And with Neptune's gravity just as strong as Jupiter's, she jumped in age and looks like she's in her 70s. You reveal that you're 4,147 years old on Mercury. Since it only takes 88 days for the planet to revolve around the Sun, you're now technically the most senior amongst them. But Mercury's weak gravity makes you look like you're in your 40s.